Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's very exciting to see you wherever you are in the world today. In preparation for World Accreditation Day, which is actually tomorrow, we've decided to launch this webinar today just to be able to give you some kind of background idea on what's going on with the World Accreditation Day, the International Organization for Standardization, Sustainable Development, marked in the middle, to be able to help us appreciate what is going on here. So what we have here today, the World Accreditation Day 2022 and the SDGs, the World Accreditation Day hosted by ILAC and the IAF, actually looked out and they picked 9 of the SDGs that they want to actually showcase for the World Accreditation Day this year. And basically, I know most of you are looking at the symbols and you're trying to pick out which ones you know, which ones you remember, and what the targets are associated with any one of the SDGs. Basically, when we talk about the SDGs, we know that there are 17 goals that are associated with the SDGs. 169 targets are across all 17. And to date, there have been 3,185 events that have happened to showcase this SDG goals, and publications, 1,322 publications have been made, and the actual hard effort actions to ensure that the attainment of these goals are reached are 6,150. So just to be able to show you, because I was actually going to make this a poll to see who remembers which SDG and what it is about, I'll take you through the 9 SDGs that are being showcased at this World Accreditation Day 2022. The first one is SDG number 6, which is clean water and sanitation. I'm not going to say much about this other than to say, if you live on the African continent and you went to any big city and you were around when there is a major rainfall, you're going to know the problems we have with clean water and sanitation. That is one of the biggest challenges that we have to deal with. Goal number 6 is ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. It has 8 targets associated with it. There have been 874 actions to date. And let me just go back and say that when we're talking about SDGs, we're actually talking about 2015 to date, which is not a very long time ago. UDESA is one of the arms of the United Nations that has actually focused on ensuring that the Sustainable Development Goals actually get some attainment. So SDG 7, affordable and clean energy. Again, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. 5 targets, to date, 814 actions. The reason why I keep on talking about the actions is I just want you to keep in the back of your mind that I'm only talking from 2015 to 2022. That's not many years ago. SDG number 8, decent work and economic growth. Now we begin to talk about small to medium enterprises. This is where they get engaged, and we're looking at goal 8 says promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. 1,509 actions have been taken across the world to be able to ensure that there is a decent workplace for all. SDG 9, it says industry innovation and infrastructure. We hear all the time, there is a serious rain, there is a tsunami, structures come down, structures are being erected and the fall. It says build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. Yes, there've been a little bit of some challenges here. There've only been 36 events that have gone on in terms of promotion, advertisement for this strategic development goal. 725 actions to date have happened around us. SDG 11 says sustainable cities and communities. When we talk about healthcare, which is SDG number 3, we're beginning to talk about more of community healthcare. And SDG 11 says, goal number 11 says, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. This, again, you could really relate this to SDG 3, which is health and well-being. Total targets 10, actions taken to date, 903, but there be 33 events that have actually happened to be able to promote this. SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. Responsible consumption and production is something that we have to be very mindful of. It says ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns, consumption and production patterns. There is so much surplus in the world today, and at the same time, there is so much need, and we need to be able to ensure how we navigate the surpluses and the need to find some equitable balance. 1,169 actions have actually been taken in this event to this action to ensure that there is an understanding around this SDG. The next few SDGs that have been selected for the World Accreditation Day is climate, SDG 13. And there is not much I could say about climate. Climate has been spoken so much of. There are so many actions that are going around the world today to be able to support climate control. It says to take urgent actions to combat climate change and its impact. Everybody will tell you today that they don't know what seasons they are in. I was in New York a couple of weeks ago, and I tell you, we saw summer before it was summer. I'm back in Uganda in East Africa. We don't know whether we're in a heavy rainy season, we're in a small rainy season, but the climate changes have actually been impacted, and SDG 13 deals with that. 1,386 actions to date have gone on in that area. Life below water, SDG 14. That's a place we don't see. That's a place, those of you who are landlocked, you don't have time to think about this. But again, there are small pools, there are all kinds of water bases around you. It says conserve and sustainable use the ocean, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. That's a very important thing. We have to make sure that the entire ecosystem is actually working and is actually in good faith. Then the number of actions that go to that, 2,248. I think this is one of the SDGs with the highest amount of actions that have been taken to date. And the last SDG I selected for the World Accreditation Day is SDG 15, life on land. Life on land, which is where we are actually. It says protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reserve land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. This is a very important thing. We are on the land today, and we can see the degradation of the land as we go on. So with this, basically, I just use this to be able to throw some light on the SDGs and their relationship to the World Accreditation Day. I'm just looking at the chat box. I see a couple of people did not get to follow the video closely, and so they're calling for the video. And I think this is a nice place to do that because the video is actually based on World Accreditation Day. So I'll pause at this point and get my technical team to do the video again, one more time, please.
The world economy relies heavily on natural resources provided by healthy ecosystems. And yet, we continue to put these ecosystems through enormous stress and to consume resources at an alarming rate. Resource extraction and processing was the cause of 90% of biodiversity loss and water stress, and contributed to approximately 50% of total greenhouse gas emissions. For long-term economic growth, a considerable shift is needed in our production forms to be more sustainable, less resource-intensive, more focused on climate mitigation and carbon removal. All this alongside biodiversity protection policies. Accreditation, alongside other quality infrastructure tools, including metrology, standardization, conformity assessment, and market surveillance, can support this shift. Third-party conformity assessment services, testing, inspection, certification, validation, and verification ensure compliance of products, services, and systems with the requirements specified or claimed. The umbrella of the ILAC, Mutual Recognition Arrangement, and IAF, Multilateral Recognition Arrangement, where signatories recognize each other's accreditations as equivalent, accreditation, and accredited conformity assessment services, provide an essential contribution to the implementation of policies and actions aiming to protect the planet. For example, by confirming that CO2 levels comply with specified limits, emissions from industries are within an acceptable range, that the traceability of organic food is clear, air, water, and soil pollution are tested, and that environmental management systems and biodiversity protection schemes are implemented. Climate change mitigation and adaptation depend on the transformation of economic activities to become climate-friendly or carbon neutral. Using accredited tests, measurements, certification, and verification and validation services strengthens the global response to the threat of climate change by playing a central role in energy efficiency programs, energy generation from renewable sources, and public policies such as carbon pricing, financing for low-carbon development projects, and by incentivizing the promotion of low-carbon solutions and carbon emission reduction schemes like ICAO Corsia. Accreditation can provide attestation that CABs are impartial, technically competent, and in compliance with relevant international standards, such as ISO 14065. General principles and requirements for bodies validating and verifying environmental information, and ISO IEC 17029. Conformity assessment, general principles and requirements for validation and verification bodies. Another standard, ISO 50001, energy management systems. Accredited services thus contribute to bringing green energy to market and making the operation of regenerative power generation plants safer. For instance, in the certification of plants for regenerative energy generation, the inspection of wind and solar power plants, and the certification of offshore wind farms. Accredited testing laboratories prepare expert opinions on wind yield or on shadow and noise forecasts for sites of new wind turbines. To reduce the impact of economic activities on the environment and support long-term economic growth, countries worldwide are shifting from a linear to a circular economy. The circular economy is an economic model where production and consumption do not compromise the environment, as it focuses on repairing, reusing, remanufacturing, and recycling, thus reducing the production of waste and the use of resources. The challenges facing the environment and subsequently the world economy are numerous. However, standards and accredited conformity assessment can help reduce the human impact on environment as we strive towards achieving sustainable development goals.
There's SDG 1, no poverty, and then there is SDG 2, SDG 2, SDG 3, which is good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality. And then we had SDG 6, which was one of the ones selected. SDG 7, 8, 9 was selected. SDG 10 was not selected, required inequalities. SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities. 12, responsible consumption and production. Climate action, life below water, and life on land. Those ones went on, were selected for this year. And SDG 16 and 17, peace, justice, and strong institutions, along with partnerships for the goals. I guess they're going to be coming up sometime soon. But just as I show you this, I want to move on now to the International Organization for Standardization and some of the standards and their relationships to the SDGs, just before we get into the small to medium enterprises and the environment and how this is going to work. But just before we do that, I have a small poll, which I would like for you to take at the start. So the idea is for you to just click and submit. It says, which SDG has the highest number of ISO standards associated with it? Just pick one, make your best guess, and hit click and click on it, and let's see what happens. Let's see how many of you picked. Great. I see a bunch of replies, and interestingly enough, everybody chose health. I kind of figured everybody would choose health on this one. But guess what? It's not health. It's not health. It's not health. Nobody chose poverty. Oh my God. Nobody chose poverty. Okay. We're going to see which one it is in a few seconds. But there is 25% of you that just kind of nailed it. There's 25% of you that just kind of nailed it, which is excellent. So these are the 17 SDGs, and this is the answer to the poll that you just took. This is the answer to the poll you just took. SDG 9, which was industry, the 25% of you who just nailed that. Here you can see the number of ISO standards that apply to each of the SDGs. So for most of you who chose health, there are only 3,074 ISO either guidelines or standards that are associated with health, from drug production to equipment production, medical equipment production, to actual hospital laboratory practices, all in health. There are only 3,074. There are more of them, 13,164 in the area of the industry innovation. Well done, well done. We'll move on. So going over to the International Organization for Standardization and Standards, I just want to do two quick things here. We'll look at the ISO itself, we'll look at the technical committee, and I'll look at two standards. The ISO itself is 75 years old this year. It has 167 national standard bodies associated. When it was formed 75 years ago, there were only 67 national standard bodies that were associated with it in 1947. And to date, what has it done? We have 24,316 international standards that are out there, published and ready to use. As I said earlier on, there are 167 member states and 807 technical committees. And basically, what's the job of the International Organization for Standardization? Is to develop voluntary, consensus-based, market-relevant international standards that are going to support innovation and be able to address challenges around the globe. And you've heard the statement before, it says accepted once, accepted always, or accepted here, accepted anywhere. That's really the reason behind that. That's what they look like. That's what they look like in 1947. 67 technical committees put together, 25 country nations meeting. Great picture. I think this is one of the most historic pictures I know of. With all due respect to the new president, I put up Eddie Joroge's picture, who is the last president of the ISO. And the only reason I put him up is because in the last 75 years of the I was addressing issues around the management system, and I said it manages interrelated parts, basically to achieve the organization's objective. That's really the prime reason for management systems. Hopefully you can hear me now, and you can see my screen. Well, so the benefits of the management system, in essence, efficient use of resources is a very important thing. Efficient use of resources and improved financial performance, improved risk management and protection of the people, protection of the people, that's one of the international standards, ISO 14001 and ISO 45001. 14001 looks at the environment, 45001 looks at occupational health and safety. And then, of course, deliver consistent and improved services. Then you have the management system standards. This actually is a really important thing to note because it actually helps us appreciate all the standards that are out there and how they're actually used. The management system standards, generally referred to as the MSS, improves performance by specifying repeatable steps. It identifies repeatable steps in your systems. It creates an organizational culture that is reflexively engaging to ensure continuity of the cycle of self-evaluation and correction. Correction is important. All ISO standards, as they become renewed and they move into new editions, they are all talking about improvement of operations. And of course, processes through heightened employee awareness and management leadership and commitment. Management's leadership and commitment is very key. In most of the high-level standards, that's clause number 5. So talking about management system standards, I just to throw out a couple of examples and so that we are able to appreciate them. I just put 3 here. There is the ISO 9001, ISO 27001 for information technology. This standard has actually gained a lot of notoriety over the ISO 45001. So in essence, these are the 3 top standards these days that are most probably solicited, and ISO 14001, environment management. Then when we talk about, so you have the general standards, then there are sector-specific standards, which are still management system standards. There is for medical services, 13485, and then there is railways. Wherever you are, there are some kind of railways, 22,163. And people in the petroleum energy industry, there is the standard 29,001 for petroleum natural gases industry. But then there are other guides and implementation guidelines that are used by the International Organization for Standardization, which take care of food safety, for example, guidelines. And then there is the guideline for auditing management systems, which basically covers and would audit any and all management systems generally. So talking about high-level structures, basically what does it come down to? High-level structures basically say that all the standards that are high-level structured have the same structure, basically. So on my left here, I have the ISO 9001, and to my right, 22003, that's for business continuity. All the ISO standards, the first 3 clauses are the same. What is your scope? What is the normative reference? And what are the terms and definitions? Those are pretty standard. Then you move from that, and then you have the next 7 clauses, which is context. In all the HLS structures, they're all the same: context, leadership, planning, support, operations, performance evaluation, and improvement. These are pretty much very standard. So for us to be able to continue, I have my next poll coming up. There are just 2 polls for this. Let's see how many people include onto the 25%, and so that we have more on that side. Okay. How many high-level standards? Exist? So the first choice is 91, the second choice is 21, and the third choice is 11. So let's see what you come up with. Must say great job, great job. I think a number of you who are on must have been on one of my previous webinars, because this came up in one of the webinars previously. And 53% of the people actually picked the right answer. That's great, that's great, that's great. The 21 high-level structured standards of a total of 91. So let's go on and see what they are. Okay, great. So just as I was saying, there are actually in total 91 management system standards, 91 of them. And of the 91 management system standards, There are 21 of them, which are high-level standards. Basically, of the 21, it means they all have the exact same 10 clauses. And literally, you could actually group them depending on what you're working on to be able to have integrated management systems, depending on how you're going to work. And you could actually take your integrated management systems up for certification. I just threw out a couple of them here. There is the 9001, there is 14,001, and 29,000, which I've highlighted separately, which are part of the management system standards, but which are also high-level structured standards, which are easy to work with. So moving on, I'm going to do 2 examples of standards so that we can appreciate their relationship to the SDGs. But now I'm going forward, talking about how these standards actually affect small to medium enterprises. Just as a way of awareness, top 5 workplace fatalities and injuries, transportation is number 1. Exposure to harmful substances is number 5. You talk about occupations, highest number of fatalities, drivers, safe workers and truck drivers, and then you go all the way down to aircraft pilots, flight engineers, where you could have occupational fatalities. Occupational health and safety, and we're going to look at what happened with OSHA. OSHA actually stopped being, 45,001 replaced OSHA in March 11th of 2021, and then we moved on to the 45,001. Basically, why is this standard important? These numbers are mind-boggling. 15 seconds, every 15 seconds, a worker dies. Some employee somewhere is going to be dead every 15 seconds. Each day, 7,600 people die as a result of work-related activities. Each year, 370 million accidents occur on the job. And that's why this standard is actually very important. But now when we look at the relationship between the OSHA and 45,001, basically it was a merger of both, but then an inclusion of basically process-based on 45,001, risk and opportunity is being taken into consideration, and then context of the organization is brought in, which was originally not on the OSHA standard. These are things that you would normally not relate to in a workplace. But of course, there is stress in the workplace, there is fatigue, there are deadlines that need to be met, there is work-life balance. Then of course, there is overwork, and all of those things are actually taken care of when we talk about ISO 45001. Then, because I'm not going to take a deep dive into 45,001, I just want to mention some hierarchy of controls. Basically, you start from the bottom going up. Just a few months ago, 2 years ago, there was the big conversation about COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2. And the first thing we spoke about was PPEs, protective personal equipment for people, and then administrative controls. How do you control the hierarchy of controls? Energy, engineering, re-engineering the situation, substitution of the hazard, or complete elimination of what is actually happening in the workplace. So because I chose COVID-19 as an example, just 3 simple things that businesses had to think as the return to work occurred. Account for factors outside your control. Transportation. You have staff that are going to use public transportation to come to work. You have to be able to think about what are you going to do as a business, as a small business? Can you provide transportation for your staff? Determine who needs to come back to work. This was a big conversation with a lot of companies, and how they will be grouped. Does everybody come back on the same day? Do you have small groups of people come back? Do you have enough physical space to be able to accommodate them? Then of course, prepare the people, prepare policies and protocols to accommodate the people as they come back. Discuss the simple hygiene of the place and how often you are going to clean. COVID was a droplet infector, so cleaning became one of the big things that needed to happen around. Just quickly again, fatalities by gender. I don't just know what is wrong with men, but men just seem to have a high tendency to be injured on the job. 4,761. This is an old one. This is as far back as 2021. That's actually just last year. Fatalities by age. 55 to 64, I think that's retirement age. So if you are not retired and tired, then the chances for being in some kind of a very unfortunate situation is actually increased. It says 1,154. And you look down the scale as you go down. Then my second example is on risk management, ISO 31000. ISO 31000 actually looks at the different objectives and how you can mitigate risk in the different objectives you have. And according to the standard, it says effect of uncertainty on objectives. You have a business and you set objectives that you want to be able to achieve. And you want to be able to know what risk is associated with each of your objectives. And the risk could either be positive, it means that there were gains that were made, or the risk could be negative, which means there are serious losses that you are going to incur. And when you look at the risk stages, basically there are just 3 risk stages. There's crisis management, something has happened and we need to do something about it. Then there is risk management. So we've moved from the crisis, we're now at risk management. Yes, it is here with us. What are we going to do? How do we go forward? Then we move from risk management to change management. Now we've accepted the risk, we're going to work with the risk, and then we now need to have a change management system that allows us to be able to move forward. This is a graph straight out of the standard. This picture comes straight out of the standard. But what I did here is you talk about establishing the context of the risk. You identify the risk, you do an analysis of the risk, you do an evaluation of the risk, and then you do a risk treatment. But I actually wanted to put this in context and look at what happened during COVID, the COVID days. There was a pandemic, then there was the shutdown, and then there was the impact. And basically, this is what every business had to do. There was an identification of what was going on. Yes, it was SARS-CoV-2. And then there was an analysis of what was actually going to happen to businesses. There was an evaluation. Some business evaluated it and they said, oh yes, we're going to have to shut down. It's acceptable for us to shut down. Some businesses, healthcare industries could not shut down. It was unacceptable for any healthcare industry to shut down. So they had to be able to say, so what is our response if we cannot shut down? And that's basically the risk assessment that happened. But now, after that risk assessment, then there is the return to work, preparing for the post-COVID. So there was the normal, the old normal, which has been overly spoken about, the old normal, how we all lived our lives before today. And then there was chaos. There was COVID-19. All of a sudden, wash your hands, don't go into gatherings. There were all kinds of things, shutdowns. But this is what happens when you're talking about standards. There is the whole element of reimagination, ISO 31000, which is the risk standard, to be able to measure and analyze the risk. There is the ISO 19600, which talks about compliance. How do you become compliant to regulations that are coming into existence? And then there is ISO 22301, which is business continuity. So just looking at these 3 standards, measuring the risk that is associated with your business, talking about compliance to any associated standards that you're dealing with or any regulatory requirements, but also ensuring business continuity is very key in being able to go on. And that's how you get to the new normal. So you kind of sort of need these 3 standards in addition to any other specific industry standards that you might already be working on or need to be working on or should have worked on to be able to allow you to enjoy the new normal. So for small businesses, basically, there are 5 stages to be able to look at. So you say, what is the next normal? What's your destination? Where are you going to? How do you get there? You have to come up with a plan. There has to be a clear plan on how you get to where you want to go to. Do you have everything you need in terms of resources? What are the things here? What are the resources you're going to need to get to your next normal? How do you measure progress towards the next normal? So you have to look at the progress. It has to be clear milestones that you're going to work towards. What threats or opportunities will we encounter on the way to the next normal? Again, we have to always think about the risk. You start with risk, you end with risk. Well, so as we look into the next one, I have a small short video here, which actually introduces us to the benefits and the beauty for the small to medium enterprises. as they try to use the standards and appreciate the things around standards. So that video is coming up in a few. Well, as the video comes on, again, I hope you get a chance to appreciate what the World Accreditation Day is doing, enhancing and relating the Sustainable Development Goals to international standards, and how the international standards are in and of themselves supporting the goals, and how those goals lead to.
Small and medium-sized enterprises are bigger business than many of us realize. You make up at least 90% of companies in most economies. And just as big are the benefits that ISO international standards can offer you, such as helping you compete on a level playing field with bigger enterprises, opening up export markets and opportunities to participate in global supply chains, providing best business practice and state-of-the-art requirements for your products and services. Perhaps most important of all, using ISO standards adds credibility and confidence for your customers. When it comes to SMEs, confidence has a nickname that's recognized worldwide. Now you know it too. It's ISO.
Okay, so that was a small, short, nice video to help introduce ISO and the small to medium enterprises. Basically, the beauty about ISO and small to medium enterprises is it builds customer confidence, which is very important for your product, services, and your management style. It meets regulation requirements at a lower cost. One of the big things about standards is that it's going to reduce waste, and waste is how many dollars you save, reduce costs across all aspects of your business, and it's going to allow you to gain market access across the world. Quality assurance comes with good standards, but then international customer satisfaction, because you're going to be trading all over the globe. Once you're certified, once you're accredited to a standard, it doesn't matter where, you become internationally recognized and internationally accepted. So talking about small to medium enterprises and looking at the environment and the risk levels that are associated with working in different risk levels. This is something I got out of McKinsey & Company, and it talks about extent of exposure and proximity of exposure. So we're looking at the extent of your exposure to the proximity of your exposure to see where the risks are higher. And this is something that as businesses, depending on the size of your business and the total surface area of workspace, it has to always be considered. So if you're doing a fine arts, graphic design, you are alone, okay, low exposure, low proximity, that's great. Then you go up to construction workers, somebody who is doing landscaping, usually they're alone, they're doing their work, real estate, farming, trucking, kind of sort of low extent of exposure and proximity is all low. Then you move to high extent of exposure, call centers. Call centers are usually slightly crowded, a bunch of people around, public service functions, small offices, research labs, proximity to exposures, factories, oh my God, universities, warehouses, daycare centers. These are places where proximity of exposure is high, too many people running around at the same time. But this is interesting. Barber shops, proximity of exposure is very high, but extent of exposure is very low. Nursing homes. And then you look at a place where proximity of exposure is high and or it's more, and extent of exposure is also very high. Airports, hospitals, stadiums, gymnasiums. But these are things that as small to medium enterprises, we need to be able to look at to be able to weigh our risk exposures and be able to make decisions around it. Here is another one. Basically, it talks about entry, and it just gives you different shades. Travel to and from work. If you're going to travel to and from work, significant public interaction, very high. That's very clear because you're going to be using public transport for the most part. If you're going to be working in large confined spaces, travel to and from work, exposure is going to be high. But now when you get down to isolated places of work, at workstations, you're sitting at your workstation, you are alone, there's nobody around you, there's nobody, you know, in one of the cubicles, then your risk levels become lower. But then these are the kinds of things that the small to medium enterprises have to look at to be able to say, how do we position ourselves to ensure that we still have people, we have services, we have products, and we have a management style that allows for us to continue to stay competitive in the business. This is what we did. During the COVID time. We went digital. We were able to still continue to carry out our work. Here we were doing an assessment of one of the labs in Uganda, and you could see the parties were all over the globe, South Africa, and wherever we were, Kenya, Uganda. But this audit was still able to happen because we were able now, after evaluating the exposures involved in traveling, in getting there and being in a hospital setting. We just saw hospital setting is very high exposures. We're able to do this digitally, which is great. So as AGQC, AGHPF, what we do and what we spend a lot of our life doing is helping institutions, businesses, government organizations, parastatals, to be able to get certifications to any number of standards, whether it's ISO 9001 for quality management systems, all the way to things as complicated as the petroleum industry or health industry 5189. Basically, we have a four-step process, which is very simple. It starts with a gap analysis. We come in, we appreciate your system. We do an audit of the system. And then we help you from that point generate documentations. Unfortunately, we do not help you write your documents. We coach you, we train you, we guide you on developing your documents, but we do not write documents for any of our clients. We help you with the implementations of those documents once they are developed, and as they go on, we do a follow-up, we carry out a mock audit in preparation for certification. This is a very simple four-step process that allows us to take any company. Standards are good for small companies, big companies, medium-sized companies. All companies need standards to be acceptable all over the globe. And then we usually throw in a freebie, as I would like to call it. So after certification, we hang around with you for another 60 days, 60 to 90 days to help you, allow you to sink in and for you to be able to appreciate the fact that you either got accredited or certified to a certain standard, and now that has become a part of your system. Of course, there is money involved in this, a lot of money as a matter of fact. Again, we have a financing option that allows any organization, whether you're small or big, to be able to work with us over time and make small incremental payments so that by the time we get in the doors and we do the gap analysis, a very small fee of 1,000. And by the time we work with you through all the trainings that are associated with the different standards that you might be trying to implement, the mentorship time, ensuring that the mock audits happen, ensuring that the external audits happen and that you are recommended for certification. All of this comes up with different dollars. And unfortunately, I cannot tell you what it is on this webinar because if you're a petroleum industry, your fees are going to be much different from if you are a healthcare industry, a hospital, for example, or a media house, or just a small mom and pop business trying to start up. Those will be different standards, different time, and different expectations. So I can't just throw out numbers, but I can tell you at the minimum 20% is going to be required upon signing our contract, and the rest of the 80% is going to be spread over a minimum of another 4 to 6 months, depending on what standard we're going to be working with you on. So that's literally our structure. Four-step process, a couple of months of payments. Some of our clients, a bunch of them all across the globe that we've worked with over the last 18 years that we've been in business. Why us? We have a solid track record. I said 18 years. We are ourselves certified to a number of the standards, so we don't train or coach people from absentia. We are familiar with the standards ourselves. We have a lot of in-house experts. We use our own people, and we have customized solutions. So we appreciate the fact that all businesses are different in spite of the fact that they might be in the same industry. So we have a customized solution for you. We have global partnerships, which means we can actually have you certified or accredited to any number of standards, whether you want a US standard, a European standard, or an Asian standard, Korean standard, a UCAS standard out of the UK, or an IAS standard out of the USA. Our global partnership allows us to be able to get this to you. And then, of course, there's always after-sales service, post-accreditation or post-certification support, which, as I said earlier on, we provide that for another 60 to 90 days. That's just a little over 3 months. Always, I like to end one of these. You know just as well as I know that there is another COVID wind that is coming through, a couple of resurgence, new cases. So please stay safe, take your temperatures, wash your hands, wear a mask, use sanitizers as often as you can. And please continue to have a good, respectful distance from each other so that if there is a new wave, you are not going to be one of the vectors. Stay away from being a vector in the new wave. Till then, I wish you well. You can reach us if you have any questions. You can reach us indeed by email, info@agqcon.com, or you could call us on our lines. Facebook, you could certainly check us up on the net. And we're right here in Uganda, plot 34A, Nakasero. So at this point, I'm going to stop and take some questions. If you have any questions, you could type them into the chat, or you could just raise your hand, and our technical team will be very glad to call you up, and we'll take you from there. So yeah, you could reach us through any of this. If you don't have any questions at this time, we'll be very glad to entertain them and provide some support. Till then, it's already 6 minutes past 4. I thank all of you for joining. It was such a pleasure to have you today. And I always look forward to doing one of these and sharing with you what is going on in the standards world. Have a wonderful afternoon. I hear somebody just snuck in at the last. Concern has been raised about how to benefit from accreditation. Does AGQC support business plan development? When you look at your ISO 9001, for example, if you look at the ISO 9001 and you put the ISO 9001 in conjunction with the ISO 31,000 and 22,301, if you pull those 3 ISOs together, 22,301 business continuity, 31,000 risk management, and 9,001 quality management systems. If you pull those 3 standards together and you work with us, we'll be able to build something for you that should be very useful. But we would not write a business plan. We do not do business plans. We do not develop business plans. We would work with you to ensure that what you put together actually allows you to look at your risk and opportunities. It allows you to be able to ensure that there is business continuity. There are statutory regulations associated with that. And also ensure that you have a simple quality management system that allows you to be able to continue work. So those 3 standards, in essence, we pull them together, we could work with you to achieve your intention. At this point, thank you all for coming, and we'll see you same time in another couple of weeks, and we'll be looking at some more standards. Wish you well and good luck.